That's it. That's why it's called Pascal's wager. Sometimes called Pascal's gambit, in fact, by mathematicians, but it has the correct echo to me precisely of the huckster on the racetrack saying, how can you lose? Have I got a bet for you? Can you imagine anything cheaper, really, or more sordid? The two things that it assumes, needs to assume, are these. One, a fantastically cynical God who's also a bloody fool. I mean, a nasty and cynical person who's also so thick that he would be fooled by me saying, tell you what, on the flip coin that you exist and I need a break, I'll say I believe in you. Says, oh, I'm really impressed now. You've just undergone a moral transformation.
Wow. That is a great way to look at this whole Pascal's wager issue.
This Blaise Pascal is considered in the first rank of Christian thinkers, I might add. The second thing...
William Lane Craig totes it all the time. Christopher Hitchens' most devastating takedowns of religion. This video looks very promising. A little bit long, but let me tell you, you can't get tired. There's no way you can get, I don't know, filled up with your Christopher Hitchens. I'm falling in love with this guy even more and more. Wish he was around. I'd love to interview him. Let's see what he has to say in this one.
In my view, if every one of the gods that have been discredited, instead of only the two or three left to us that haven't yet been completely shown up as man-made fabrications and joined Thor and Ashtaroth and Huitzilopochtli and the Aztecs and all the others.
I feel like they have, but I don't want to stop his flow.
All of these were proven to be fraudulent and false and man-made. I believe our moral dilemmas would be exactly the ones we face now.
Wow.
All of us, atheist, agnostic, philosophical, Socratic, or true believer. We would still have to wonder about the purpose of our existence here. We would still have to wonder about the origins of the cosmos and of nature. We would still have to wonder about our duties to one another. We would still have to wonder about how to build the just city, how to reflect on truth and on beauty. All of these dilemmas would remain exactly the way they are, unaltered by any supernatural dimension. It's a problem principally because it is man-made, because to an extent it is true, as the church used to preach when it had more confidence, that we are, in some sense, originally sinful and guilty. If you want to prove that, you only have to look at the many religions that people have constructed to see that they are indeed the product of an imperfectly evolved primate species, about half a chromosome away from a chimpanzee,
wow,
with a prefrontal lobe that's too small, an adrenaline gland that's too big, and various other evolutionary deformities about which we're finding out ever more. A species that is predatory, a species that's very fearful of itself and others and of the natural order, and above all, very, very willing, despite its protestations of religious modesty, to be convinced that the operations of the cosmos and the universe are all operating with us in mind. Make up your mind whether you want to be modest or not. But don't say that you are made out of dust, or if you're a woman out of a bit of rib, or if you're a Muslim out of a clot of blood, and you're an abject sinner born into guilt. But add, nonetheless, let's cheer up. The whole universe is still designed with you in mind.
The way he is with words. What a poet.
This is not modesty or humility. It's a man-made false consolation, in my judgment, and it does great moral damage. It warps, it begins by warping what we might call our moral sense of proportion. There is, whether you are a materialist or a supernaturalist, no particular reason to say that human life has any enormous innate value. After all, religion disposes of people in heaps and mounds and says, go out, we depart into eternal fire, you're dust, you're nothing. If you don't have our faith, you're nothing less than nothing, you're worse, or evil, wicked, so forth. So it's not as if by assuming a God, you suddenly find that life is all worthwhile after all. If it was that simple, we wouldn't have to be having this discussion. I think this, essentially, I ask myself, why do I care? Why do I care not just about myself and my children, but why do I think I often care in general? Well, if I didn't, I wouldn't belong to a species that would have got this far. It may sound a platitudinous answer, but I think there's some force to it. If we didn't have human solidarity, if we didn't realize that we are brothers and sisters one with another, that we have responsibilities, duties to one another, that these are not merely reciprocal in evolutionary terms, in other words, you be nice to me, I'll look out for you, but that they can involve real ties, real bonds of affection, friendship, even love. If we didn't know that we were able to think like that, and we exempt a quite large minority of humans who are born without this, the sociopaths and psychopaths, who I suppose we have to concede are also made in God's image, if you accept that tautology. It leaves nothing really unexplained. That would tell us why we had warm feelings for one another, and also explain why we were here instead of having joined the species that went, all the other ones that went out of business under the same divine supervision, I might add, including humanoid species like the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals, who it's quite clear buried each other with care and with love, looked out for one another, and so forth and so on, but somehow didn't make some divine grade. Do you see where I'm going with this? I do hope so.
Pascal knew that there were always people, there would always be people, always had been people, who are constitutionally incapable of believing this stuff, can't be brought to believe it. And one of his cruder attempts to break down resistance of people like myself was this. Said, look, what have you got to lose? Say you believe in God, and if he does exist, you have a chance of his favor. If you go ahead like this and say he doesn't, what if he does exist? You lose everything. That's it. I don't think I've condensed it in any unfair way. That's it. That's why it's called Pascal's wager. Sometimes called Pascal's gambit, in fact, by mathematicians, but it has the correct echo to me precisely of the huckster on the racetrack saying, how can you lose? Have I got a bet for you? Can you imagine anything cheaper, really, or more sordid? The two things that it assumes, needs to assume, are these. One, a fantastically cynical God who's also a bloody fool. I mean, a nasty and cynical person who's also so thick that he would be fooled by me saying, tell you what, on the flip coin that you exist and I need a break, I'll say I believe in you. He says, oh, I'm really impressed now. You've just undergone a moral transformation.
Wow. That is a great way to look at this whole Pascal's wager issue.
This Blaise Pascal is considered in the first rank of Christian thinkers, I might add. The second thing it
William Lane Craig totes it all the time.
Assumes, of course, is the most corrupt and vulgar kind of consumer, the sort of person who would fall for a deal like that and would think that would be nice. I'll bet correctly. I hope you'll forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, for mentioning this, because I don't at all want to invoke my own particular case in an attempt to gain your sympathy. I'll say it as objectively as I can. Some of you may have read that I'm not very well and may not have very long to live. I find it particularly objectionable that this wager, which Pascal offers to anyone at any time in their life, to be fair to him, tends to be pressed on you all the time, if you don't look as if you're going to last very long, by people who say, surely that now you might be frightened and not feeling at your best and afraid of a smelly and a disgusting end. Surely this would be the perfect moment to repudiate all the convictions of a lifetime. For some reason, that comes naturally to a lot of people of faith. I don't mind for myself, but I think it's the vilest kind of bullying to inflict on people in hospital and people who are in extremis.
Wow. Yeah, because no matter what, we're all going to have to face the moments of dying. And that's so sad that that kind of structures even a thing humans have constructed for themselves to give ourselves this fear or even to continue perpetrating it. And it's this like self-replicating system of making everyone afraid so that their last moments, they might as well say, Hail Mary or Jesus, help me in the last moments, just in case. The fact that life is so rough and tough and those moments are terrifying is really sad that a religion would taps into that and really wants to force people when they're approaching their end to have to do that. Really, really terrible.
People have the nerve to ask me, well, if you don't believe in heaven and hell, what gives your life meaning? Do you not detect a slight insult as well as a slight irrationality to that question? You mean I'd have much more meaning in my life if I thought that I would die and I'd be given one chance, or would have been given while I was alive, one chance, and if I'd made a mistake, I'd be condemned eternally. That was the kind of judge I'd be facing. And in the meantime, it would be advisable to live my life in propitiation of this supernatural dictator. That would lend more meaning to my life than my view counter to Pascal, contra Pascal, that if there's any such judge, I'll be able to say, at least I never faked belief in you in order to win your approbation, sir, or ma'am, as the case might be. And if you are as reported, you'll have detected that those were my thoughts, and at least I wasn't a hypocrite. Pascal says, no, at least pretend you believe. It's win-win. This is corrupt reasoning. It's the reasoning of a huckster. And it lends no meaning to life at all. Still, why do I care? For example, why do I care? Why do I care about Rwanda? Why do I care about my Iranian friends fighting theocracy? Why do I give up my own time to them? Well, I'll tell you why. And I say it, I suppose, at the risk of embarrassment. It gives me great pleasure to do so. I like to feel that since we only have one life to live, that I can help people make it free as best I can, and assist them in the real struggle for liberty, which in its most essential form is the struggle against theocracy, which is the original form that dictatorship and violation of human rights actually takes. If William Wilberforce was indeed animated by Christianity in his campaign against slavery, he should have been, because it was about time that there was a Christian who said that this trade had gone on long enough. And any Christian should have felt responsible for saying so, because for the entire period of its existence, slavery and the slave trade had been justified directly by reference to the Christian religion and by direct references to the warrant for slavery that's contained in Holy Writ and in Scripture. And that's why we like the captain who wrote Amazing Grace, because he'd been the captain of a slave ship. And he was just as much of a Christian when he was doing the first thing as he was when he was doing the second. The chances, though, that a member of the American Anti-Slavery Society, Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, the others, was not a Christian would be extremely high. The chances that until very, very, very late in the 19th century, a defender of slavery would be a Christian was statistically enormous. It therefore proves absolutely nothing about Christianity that some of its members finally turned against one of their foulest practices and impositions. And if I was a Christian, I would avoid this argument very carefully as tending to show that there is no basis in faith for morality, that our morality is innate to us. And it's very nice when sometimes religion catches up to morality for a change. Thank you.
Okay, that is a very well... Look, it's kind of funny. I was having a long talk with my buddy Don last night, and we were in Genesis. We were talking about this very issue about antebellum South slavery and Noah's sons in Genesis 9, I believe it is, the genealogy, where he goes and talks about Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham's descendants, or Ham's grandson or son, Canaan, would be a servant of servants. Well, when you look at how the Bible treats these three sons of Noah, Japheth represents the north, European, Greek, these kind of regions in the north, the Scythian, that territory. Japheth represents the Near Eastern side. Hold on. Shem represents the Near Eastern side. Ham represents like Egypt, North Africa side. Ham's descendants would be servants of servants. So Christians, using the Bible, interpreted the blacks that came from Africa as actual, prophetic, perpetual slaves. The insanity that has been perpetrated using the Bible for slavery is honestly insane, and they were the ones driving the whip and really pushing this. So what Christopher just said is so powerful that It was people with critical thinking, whether they were deists, whether they had some form of theism, clearly not driven Christian apologists, if you will, who are initiating this kind of criticism towards this system that is cruel in itself, but particularly and specially cruel under antebellum South slavery, unique in the world, for racial reasons and perpetual reasons. And we're talking like there's never, when America first started, there was a way where you could become free, you can buy your freedom, things like that. But the laws changed, and they changed with help of the Bible, combined with the fact that it's cheap labor to just keep their descendants and their descendants perpetually. And of course, they backed it up through scripture. Sorry for the long rant, and excuse me for using the term blacks. I don't mean that in a negative way. I simply mean that in the sense that that is how they were viewed during this time in slavery. And my buddy Don, by the way, he's a big YouTuber, and he's schooling me. He's helping me understand some of the stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, he's a black guy, and he's like, dude, this thing was different. It's a bit different here in the South, what happened versus the rest of the world. And we were going over it and just talking about Bible. And so apologies to anyone who might have taken offense there, but I just want to make it clear that the Bible has been used as a weapon this way for a very, very long time. Hitch.
If you allow faith schools, we'll allow them to have their faith schools. Cultural suicide. Cultural suicide. Don't let it happen to you. Don't let it happen where you live. Look at how wonderfully it worked. You know it very well. What happened in Northern Ireland when it was allowed to segregate Protestant and Catholic schools. After all, they have different faiths. Oh, they do? I thought they were both Christian. I can't arbitrate this. No, they should have separate schools. They should never meet, never intermarry, never socialize. Beautifully that worked out. And how? Now let's have it for Jews and Muslims too on the mainland. Let them all lie to their children. Let them all give their special myth. Let them all say to them that they're different. Let them not tell them that they're members of a civil society or a country or a nation. Let them denominate themselves by faith. Can't wait to see what happens. I think I know what's coming. I don't want my beloved country of birth to be turned into some f***ing Lebanon by people of faith. I don't want it. I'm going to fight it too. And you should get ready to fight it when they try it in your case. Don't allow this.
Wow.
Putting the word faith in front of something is no excuse for barbarism and cruelty and ignorance and stupidity. Just as putting the word reverend in front of a stupid name like Falwell or Sharpton doesn't mean he should be on MSNBC.
Hold on, I need to know, where is he from? So Christopher Hitchens, born, let me do that here real quick. Christopher Hitchens' birthplace. So he was born, Hitchens was born in Portsmouth, Hampshire, the elder of two boys. So I suspect, okay, Hampshire, I believe that he, the United Kingdom, it's almost prophetic, some of the stuff that we're seeing happening today right now with what's going on with Islam in a lot of these European countries. It's almost like he saw the writing on the wall before it happened.
Learn to resist it because you're going to need to. Because this is about you.
I'm right there with.
Wow. Human decency is not derived from religion. It precedes it.
I do not believe that I was
precedes or even proceeds, if that's a term.
Created. And I don't believe I was created sick and then commanded to be well. I just choose not to believe it. I don't think it's a plausible proposition. I don't think that it's plausible to say that you hate the sin and love the sinner when you talk like Mr. Donahue does about homosexuals.
Now, why are people dead from sex? Is it because they are practicing natural sex, or are they practicing unnatural, promiscuous sex?
How do you love somebody? You love them by telling them the truth, not by confirming or affirming their sin. Leviticus 18, God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters, is that thou shalt lay with another man shall be stoned to death. Just saying.
That's what I believe that the scripture says, that homosexuality is a sin.
It's a sin.
You think I'm sinful because I'm married to a man?
Yeah.
You do?
Yes, you're sinning. You are in a sinful relationship.
And I think it's casuistry anyway, because who really goes around saying, I don't like rape, but I love those rapists?
Wow. Wow. That last statement, that's a really good point.
I think we are divided as between those of us who attribute our presence here to the laws of biology and the laws of physics, and those of us who, and we're modest in doing that, I think. We say we submit ourselves to the evidence, and even if it comes up with conclusions that aren't very welcome to us, we will accept them if they're well-founded. And those who are conceited enough, I would say, arrogant enough, in fact, to think that they are here as the consequence of a divine design. There's all the difference in the world between those two worldviews, and the big difference is one of them has evidence for it and the other doesn't. And one of them will say in advance what would refute it. I can tell you, if you ask me, what evidence, if presented, would mean I'd have to change my mind, and the theist will never do that. He will never tell you in advance, show me this and I'll stop believing in it. There's always an infinite replenishment of the infinitely renewable resource of faith.
I've even heard people who do try to say that in like gotcha moments on videos where they say, show me and I'll change. I'll become a Muslim or I'll stop believing. And then you show them and then like he said, the vacuum gets filled with something else and they find another way to get out of it. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Going on. In fact, it's the humility of it that makes me laugh at it in a way the most. They say that they're humble, these believers in God. They want to be written up as modest because they think that, of course, that God tells them they're worms, originally sinful, ingrates, incurable, made out of dust in one narrative, out of a clot of blood in the Quranic narrative, bad, off to a pretty shaky start, condemned since an original fall of man. Nonetheless, cheer up. The universe is designed with you in mind. This is a depraved form of sadomasochism in my view. It's not good for you to go from this terrible abjection and serfdom in the one instance to this belief that you are the center of creation and the object of the cosmos in the other. It's a terrible alternation, an erotic alternation between being much too servile and much too arrogant.
Teaching of that kind, teaching about abstention, clearly cannot lead to death from sex. But to say that AIDS is death from sex is, I think, to commit an obscenity. I'm sorry to have to say that the brothers and sisters of our society who have succumbed to that appalling disease did not die of sex or of their sexuality. And remember, homosexuality is not just a form of sex, it's a form of love. They died. That's interesting. I wondered what kind of a growl I might get there. Well, I'll repeat it then. Homosexuals practice not just a form of sex, but a form of love. If you can't live with it, I think you're the poorer. However, what they died of was a filthy virus which can and will be cured. And the clear implication of what Dr. Donahue said was that
I love him for this. Gosh, I love him for this. And he's ahead of his time. You can tell that's an older video. But it's also interesting. You look at like smallpox, you look at various forms of diseases. They're not tied to a sex situation. I'm sure they came up with some bullshit sin excuse or some explanation through sin as to why these things happen. Believers do that. But it's really funny when a particular sexually transmitted, typically, not always, but typically, kind of disease, they want to attribute it to the behavior. But then you find other diseases where people are dying that have nothing to do with sexual morality, and they're not jumping to, oh, it's this sinful thing in our book from a long time ago that we've interpreted to mean those things.
it was some kind of judgment on their sexual preference. I'm sorry, I can't sit here, rather stand here and take that. This is why I don't think secular morality needs to be defended from the barbaric superstitions and guilts and obscene suggestions that are made by the godly, or from the repressions and unguessable motives that lie behind people who talk and think and sound like that. I think the religion gets a free pass in making moral casuistry of this kind. I think it is possible. I may not be the best example of it, and I did flicker a bit with enthusiasm when the alcohol and tobacco lobbies were mentioned a moment ago. If you'd thrown in firearms, you'd have had me altogether. I may not be the best example for it, but it is possible and probably necessary that people lead ethical and moral lives without claiming the solipsism of divine protection. Thank you. I do insist that this kind of bad behavior is innate in religion, is part of religion itself. It's not an abuse of it or something undertaken in the name of. It's a direct consequence of the willingness to believe in the supernatural and the willingness to believe in a supernatural dictatorship in particular. And we live on a very small planet, in a very minor solar system, on the very edge of a gigantic galaxy, where the remainder of the planets, just in our own solar system, are either too fucking hot or too sodding cold to support life of any kind, as is true of very great swathes of our own planet, which is on a climatic knife edge, if we didn't know before, we know now. So to say that this is the center of the universe and the whole objective of the cosmos is to produce this conversation is an extraordinarily self-centered thing to do, it seems to me. Yeah, and also doesn't, in return for its self-centeredness, which might be excused in the Randian terms, at least let's think we're gods. At least let's believe that we are the most beautifully charismatic sex maniacs have ever appeared on any planet. Doesn't yield any knowledge. Doesn't help us in the least to clarify anything. No, I think we would do much better to understand our place in the cosmos. And I think if we did, we'd turn to each other with a little more respect. Yeah. And concern and compassion and understanding. And maybe to the people who we've found are spliced into our own DNA as well. Having this wonderful sequencing, having abolished racism and creationism at one stroke, I regard that as a huge step forward, I must say, to understand one's kinship with all other humans, with some other animals, even with vegetables and plants. It doesn't make me feel worse, it makes me feel better. It also makes me feel I know where I am, which the other stuff simply doesn't. So I wouldn't trade that for any of your pseudo-universality. Sorry.
Wow. This is part 1 of this Christopher Hitchens' most devastating takedowns of religion. Stay tuned for part 2 because I really love listening to this guy. I mean, he definitely, I didn't realize how impressive he really was. I used to not like him when I saw him debating Christians when I was a fundamentalist. I've grown to obviously appreciate and love him since deconverting and realizing, man, he had some words of wisdom, some deep words of wisdom to teach us, and to have us think. So what a sobering perception. Again, I always think of him as this sharp, very sobering, clear-minded, seeing a major issue, a flaw, a bug in the systems that have influenced all of us and that we've evolved with. And it's kind of funny because when you look back at some examples of ancient history where humans sacrificed humans and they believed it as part of their evolutionary process, that this is something good. They believed it was good, a way in which they would appease the god, giving a gift to the dictator of the heaven, the master of their lives. And they were killing one of their own, a human themselves, right? Eventually, the moral compass seems to be pointing towards animals that replace that. And of course, there were many ancient Greeks and Romans who criticized other religions who sacrificed animals like Judaism in the temple. As literally they're killing one of their own loved ones because they viewed these animals as reincarnations of their own families or friends. But I say all that to say, like, this guy can just see through it all in a way that not many people do. Please take the time to comment. YouTube really, really rewards YouTube channels when they see people interacting in the comment section. And I hope you'll do that to help us grow. Be sure to subscribe and check that bell. If you don't check the bell and you just subscribe, they won't notify you every time we drop a new reaction. And I hope to see you in the crowds. I really appreciate all of you. The comments that you drop, they inspire me and they make me move forward each and every day. I love seeing you there. I love seeing the comments and just, okay, we're on this path together. So check that bell, like the videos every time, share them if you can, if you have anywhere to. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate all of you. Until next time, See you then.